In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the 3 times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious, exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma becomes the path. Please bless us that the path dispels confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. So first of all, I would like to say Tashi Delek to everyone who's listening, and continuing with these teachings on the String of Pearls by GAMPOPA. And when we begin this teaching, we should, as usual, check our motivation first. We should always check and see, do we have a good motivation, a neutral motivation, or a bad motivation? Generally, just the fact that you clicked on the link to look at this teaching is a sign of having some degree of a virtuous motivation, but sometimes it takes a while to, it might be less, more or less. So look at yourself, and if your motivation is tending towards the less virtuous or the neutral, then maybe try to remind yourself to think that we are engaging in these teachings in order to benefit ourselves and all other sentient beings. And so think to yourself that you're listening in order to learn about the Dharma, so that you can practice the Dharma, and by practicing the Dharma, help yourself and all other sentient beings come to a state of lasting happiness. So in the teachings on the String of Pearls, these collection of talks by GAMPOPA, there are 20 talks. You could count it as 19. There are 2 that go together very well, and so you could count those as 1, or you could count them separately as 2, so that you could count it as either 19 or 20. So if we count it in terms of 19, then we've gone through 9 of the talks. If we count it in terms of 20, we've gone through 10 of the talks. It doesn't really matter how we count it. At any rate, we are talking about we've come to the talk halfway through, more or less. And as in the previous talks, I will go through and I'll first read the text of the talk, and then then I'll go through and go back and speak about some of the words in the talk. So to read it first in GAMPOPA's words, it starts, "As for the Dharma, I would like to share with you all. To truly practice the Dharma, this life is transient and there is no time. So you must give away everything you can. You should train in giving with just fire and water. If you merely know that you are unwilling to give even fire and water, you will be reborn as a hungry ghost with a blocked throat. If you get used to giving small things, eventually you'll be able to give large things such as your head and limbs. You'll be able to give your eyes with no difficulty. When you get to that point, you have separated yourself from samsara. So first train in giving fire and water, then minor things, and then you must give whatever you really need or really like. In order to practice that, in the tradition of the transcendences, samsara and nirvana can be summarized in 2 lines. The way you grasp shows how you are afflicted. Not seeing me or mine is said to be utterly pure. As long as you have clinging, there are afflictions. Greed arises from clinging, and hatred arises from ego clinging. Hatred arises from clinging to children, and attachment arises from clinging to children. Hatred arises from perceiving enemies. Attachment arises from clinging to fame, and aversion from clinging to obscurity. Similarly, attachment comes from praise and so forth. Because of clinging to dualistic cognitions in various ways, we do not escape samsara and go to places of long-lasting suffering. Thus it is taught that we must do the opposite and make it so we cannot observe a me or a mine. To practice that, look whether the self is true or not. Look whether the self is permanent or impermanent. Look whether the self has a nature or not. By looking in those ways, you see that the self is impermanent, freeing yourself of clinging to mine. If you have no attachment to a self, you are freed of all attachment. Up until that time, because of apprehending a me, mine arises. Because me and mine arise, we wander in samsara. Because me arises, these are my children, my enemies, wealth, and so forth. Many things that are mine. This makes us wander in samsara. Know that me is merely a dream and illusion. Know that the self is impermanent. By knowing that, the self is not seen. And when the self is not seen, then no mine is seen. So the quote explains, not seeing me or mine is said to be utterly pure. Since that is so, you must abandon all ego clinging. Samsara is to be completely given up. So you must practice that me and mine cannot be seen. Utter purity is a quality of nirvana. So also train in giving away everything from fire and water up to your own body and abandon all attachment. Give up all greed. Identify all your faults and give them up. Look where all your secret faults are and banish them. You do not know when the next life will come. Well, and when illness strikes abruptly and death comes suddenly, regret is bad karma. So strive and practice from this very moment on. There is no dharma but that. So here in this talk, as with most of his talks, Gampopa begins the reminder of impermanence, telling us that to truly practice the Dharma, we have to remember that this life is transient and there's no time. And because this life is transient, then we should remember that we have to be generous. We have to be able to give away everything we possibly could. But when we begin as ordinary people, we can't give away everything. You can't give away your houses or your cars or everything right away. You have to work up to it. You have to start with small gifts and then work up to larger gifts. It's like I said last time, when we do practice, you start with something small that you can do and sustain, and then make it a little bit larger and larger and larger. And then as you do so, then eventually you'll be able to be generous on a great scale, and you'll also be able to practice on a great scale. So here, Gampopa starts by saying we should practice by giving away fire and water. Now, these days, fire and water aren't quite like they were at the time of Gampopa. At the time of Gampopa, if you wanted water, you had to go fetch it. Maybe you had some fresh water nearby, or maybe you didn't, but you still had to go out and take your pot or whatever you're going to collect it in and go fetch your water. It wasn't like you could just turn on a tap. And with fire, you had to be really careful because you didn't have matches. It was harder to light a fire. So you had to kind of work you had to get the right type of moss to light and tinder and all this and make it. So fire wasn't just a matter of striking a match or using a butane lighter the way we do these days. But still, once you have fire and water, they're not actually all that expensive. You don't have to spend a lot of money. If someone needs some fire, you need to give them a coal. It doesn't sound like much now, but it meant a big deal in the past. If you're not willing to give someone that, even just a coal from your fire so they can start their fire, then how can you say that you're generous? If you aren't willing to share a little drink, a little bit of the water that you've already collected, how can you say that you're generous? So you start by giving away something small. Fire and water, even though they take a little bit of effort, or they took a little bit of effort a long time ago, they don't take effort anymore. Even though they took a little bit of effort, they aren't hard to get. And they're not hard to maintain. And so if you're willing to give those, you start with giving something small. And then you work up to giving something larger, and then something larger than that, and so forth, until you're ready to give away at anything. It's like it says in The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. He says, there is not anything at all that is not easy if you're used to it. And so with giving, he also says that the Buddha taught that we begin by practicing to give by giving away cooked vegetables. So you imagine if you are able to give away, a nice dish of vegetables to someone. It doesn't take too much to do it. You just can make a little gift of a dish of vegetables. They can get another dish from someone else. And then that's where you start. You start giving something small that you can do that is not hard. There's even the story in the sutras about the person who was so stingy that he couldn't even give something from his right hand to his left hand. So the Buddha taught him to take a pebble and to practice giving that pebble from his right hand to his left hand and from his left hand to his right hand. And then he was eventually able, by starting with something small, he was able to develop the thought where he was actually able to give things to other people and was no longer a stingy person. And so we start with practicing with generosity. And generosity is a really important quality for us to practice, because it really opens us up. Instead of clinging to me, because when you are not generous, when you're stingy, you're thinking, this is my thing. This is me, this is mine. And then you're unwilling to give it. So you're really tight. So when you're willing to give it away, then you're more open. And you see that there's less attachment to being me and mine. And as that attachment loosens, then you can begin to look at the nature of that attachment more. So then Gampopa talks about how we need to practice by getting rid of that attachment to a me and mine. And he talks about how we have two things, the afflicted and the utterly pure. This is what it's called in a sutra. The way you grasp shows how you are afflicted. Not seeing me or mine is said to be utterly pure. So the afflicted means samsara. It doesn't just mean the afflictions themselves, your experiences of greed, hatred, envy, pride, and so forth. It also means the things that you are attached to, that you get afflicted about, the things you get angry about or attached to or stingy over or proud about. And then the opposite of that is the utterly pure, which is when you don't see either me or mine. And the reason why this is important, because as long as you cling to things, you have afflictions. As Gampopa says, greed arises from ego clinging and hatred arises from ego clinging. So as long as you're thinking that there's a me, then you want things for me that are going to make you happy. And you want to get rid of the things that are going to make you, that you think are going to make you unhappy. So that's greed and aversion or hatred. Then he says something very curious. Hatred arises from clinging to children, and attachment arises from clinging to children. Now, you might think to yourself, how could this be? How can clinging to children bring both hatred and attachment? But if you think about it, there's your cute little child, your sweet little child, and you're so attached to your little child that anyone who is going to threaten your child is an enemy who you hate. So that's how hatred arises, from clinging to children. And then, of course, it's your sweet little child, your cute little child, and thinking that my child is attachment. And so this is clinging to things because we think of me as being real, and we think of the other thing as being real, and then we think of some things as being mine, and other things as being not mine, and we want to keep the things that are mine. But actually, if you look at it, the idea of me or mine is just an idea. It's just something we've made up in our head. So it's easier to see this, as Trungpa Rinpoche often gives this example, so I'm just going to follow in Rinpoche's footsteps. It's like when we want to understand what we mean by clinging to a me and clinging to mine. It's easiest if you first start thinking about clinging to mine. What is clinging to mine? Well, the example is that if you have an expensive watch, so maybe in the past you would have said a Rolex, maybe now you'd say an Apple Watch. You have this expensive watch. Now, when you go into the Apple store, there are all the Apple Watches laid out there. Of course, you can't go in right now. When you used to be able to go in the Apple store 2 months ago, you'd see all the watches laid out. And if one of the watches fell onto the ground and broke, you'd say, too bad. But Apple's got a lot of money. Apple can afford it. It's not a big deal. It's just a demo model anyways. You wouldn't really care. The watch fell on the floor, the screen broke, you wouldn't care. But when it's your Apple Watch, and you like it, and you like all the functions, you think, this is my Apple Watch. And then you drop your Apple Watch and the screen breaks. And not only does the screen break, because it's an Apple Watch, you can't just go out and replace the crystal. You have to replace the entire screen, and you find out that it costs more to change the screen than it actually would to buy a new watch. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, how can this be? What's happened? And you're upset because it's your Apple Watch. If it's the one in the store, you don't care. If it's the one that you wear, you do care. So what's the difference? There's no difference in the watches. They're just the same. You know, they've got the electronic guts, they've got the screen and the wristband and all that. They're the same. The machine is the same. The only difference is that one of them you think, this is my watch. And the other one you think, it's Apple's watch, doesn't matter if it's broken. That sense of mine. So it's an idea in your head. So that's made up. It's the same thing with a car. If you see a car crash on the road, someone who's driving a red Ferrari gets into a car crash, you say, served him right, driving a Ferrari. When it's your Ferrari that's in the crash, then you're like, oh my gosh, it's my Ferrari. What happened? So that's that thought of mine. Now, what does that mine come from? It comes from a thought of me. Well, what is this me? Well, we can look at the me. The me, you can look at your body. Is your body me? Well, which part of your body is me? Is your hand your me? Is your head me? If your whole body a me, if your whole body is a me and you're in a terrible accident and your right arm is chopped off, are you less of a person? No, you're still as much of a person. You only have one arm, but you're still a person. No less of a person, less of a body, but not less of a person. And so that's that idea of there being a me. It's not your body. Well, is it your mind? Well, where is your mind? Is your mind in your body someplace? Is it outside of your body? What is it like? You can't really find it either. And then it's always changing so quickly. One moment you're happy, and next moment you're unhappy, and the next moment you're asleep. And another moment you're thinking one thing, your mind is changing all the time. What among all those states would be me? You can't find anything that would be me. So the idea of me and mine is like an illusion. So we have to realize that this idea of me and mine is like an illusion. Because if we don't, then you think me, and then when you think me, you think mine, my children, my money, my enemies, and so forth. And because of thinking me and mine in this way, we wander in samsara. So we must know that idea of me is just an idea. So GAMPOPA says, know that me is merely a dream and illusion. So when we say that me is like a dream and illusion, that means that we see a me, we think about me. It seems like there's a me, and we can do things with a me just like we can do things in dreams, but actually there's nothing really there. It's impermanent and it's always changing. So when you give that up, when you're free of that, then that brings us to utter purity. And so in order to get there, we have to start by practicing with generosity, starting with small generosity, working up to larger and larger generosity, until you're ready to give away everything that you really like and everything that you really need. So that is the first of these Dharma talks that I'm speaking about today. And so now we will come to the next Dharma talk by GAMPOPA. And to read this talk, it begins, to offer you all some Dharma. At this time, you must think of it. You do not know when death will come. Once you are caught in the Lord of Death's noose, you will have no freedom. At this time, when you have some control over yourself, you must cultivate the lasting crop. First, you must entrust your mind to the Guru's, Yidam's jewels and supplicate them fervently with faith, desire, longing, and dedication. Profit, fame, and greatness and praise in this life are no help to practicing the Dharma from your heart, so you must be able to jettison them. You must offer entirely all your body and possessions to the Gurus and jewels and concentrate on practice. Thus, in order that all sentient beings may achieve perfect Buddhahood, think that you will be generous, keep discipline, practice patience, be diligent, rest in the equipoise of dhyana, and develop prajna. Plant deep in your heart the thought that you must practice all 6 transcendences. To sum up Dharma practice, there are 2 things you should know, the ultimate and the relative. Relatively, there is karma and the ripening of karma. There are all the afflicted phenomena such as birth, aging, pleasure, and pain. There is the utterly pure, nirvana, and the qualities, kayas, and wisdoms as explained in the Prajnaparamita. Thus, as long as in the relative we have thoughts of self and other, virtue and misdeeds are true. Thus, we need to be extremely conscientious about virtuous and unvirtuous karma. If we accumulate virtuous karma now, the pleasure of a good result will ripen in our next life. But if we commit misdeeds and bad karma now, in the next, the resulting suffering of the lower realms will ripen. No result occurs without a cause, and Buddhahood does not come from a wrong or lesser cause. It is said in the chapter of collecting qualities in the Prajnaparamita, until the roots of virtue are perfected, you won't achieve the highest emptiness. If not supported by the cause, the 10 virtues, the 10 Dharma actions, or the 6 transcendences, you will not achieve Buddhahood. There is a great danger that the view will become empty talk and your mind will remain ordinary. As long as everything you hear from the Guru is really true, the 6 realms of samsara are also true. When you no longer have attachment to truth, the 6 realms are also liberated on their own and go away. Thus, until your own clinging to truth is liberated on its own, the relative is true. During that time, there is also cause, result, and the ripening of karma. So it is important to believe in karmic cause and effect. When the relative has been liberated on its own, and you have abandoned a me or a self, then it is taught that ultimately there is no ripening of karma. The point at which that ultimate truth has been realized is when you are freed of desirous thoughts, the pride of conceit, and the jargon of speech and words. All thoughts of all self or other are purified on their own, and there is no appearance of self or other. At that point, you have realized the ultimate. Then there is neither karma nor the ripening of karma. When you have realized that reality, you are freed of all of self-interest, and for the sake of others, you do whatever is helpful for sentient beings. As your realization improves, your compassion grows stronger. It is just as Master Vairochana said, although you realize the meaning beyond birth and death, composite virtue must be continuous. Have you realized the ultimate, or does the relative appear? You must look at yourself. Even if you have realized the ultimate, meditate on compassion for sentient beings. You must bring even more benefit to sentient beings. Master Nagarjuna said, the Dharma taught by the Buddhas is based on the 2 truths, the worldly relative truth and the truth of the ultimate meaning. You must practice the 2 truths inseparately. There is no Dharma but that. So this talk is speaking about primarily about the relative and the ultimate truths. We talk about these 2 truths. So relative truth means essentially the appearances of this life. The appearance of cause, karmic cause and effect. The appearances of karmic cause and effect, seeing things of this world, the appearances of this world. And this is relative truth is when we cling to them as being real. The ultimate truth is when we realize that the appearances of this world are merely transient appearances that occur because of causes and conditions coming together through interdependence. They occur, they appear, but there's nothing real or true about them. So the difference between the 2 of them is primarily how are we clinging to them? How much clinging do we have to the truth? And so as long as we cling to there being a me and other, as long as we think that there's a real me and a real other, then we see that cause and effect as being true, and then we are in relative truth. And when there's relative truth, there's cause and effect, so there's karma. That means you do something and it's going to have an effect. And we experience the results as if they're true. We experience birth and aging and pleasure and pain and so forth. So as long as we're thinking, as Gampopa says, as long as in the relative we have thoughts of self and other, virtue and misdeeds are true. So we must be very careful about karmic cause and effect. Sometimes we might think that because everything is empty, we have an idea about the ultimate truth. There is no real thing. It is all like dreams and illusions, causes and conditions and interdependence. We think that means, oh, therefore virtues and misdeeds aren't real. But because that's only a conceptual idea, it's not enough. As long as we still have the idea of me and mine, and it's a very subtle idea and a very tricky idea and hard to get rid of, as long as we have that idea, then we're still going to experience karmic cause and effect. So we have to be careful, really careful to do good things and give up bad things. And so because of that, we also have to gather all the causes that are going to bring us to the ultimate. Now, of course, ultimately, the ultimate truth doesn't come out of causes. It's just seeing the nature. But to us, it seems like it does. So as long as it seems like it does, we have to do the things that are going to put us in a state where we're going to be closer to looking at the truth. So that means that we need to do virtuous things. We need to practice generosity. We need to be as giving, because as we just spoke about in the previous talk, giving is a way of loosening our attachment to me and mine. We need to practice discipline, which means primarily the discipline of giving up bad actions and the discipline of practicing good actions and developing our qualities. And we also need to be patient. We need to be able to be diligent. We need to practice meditation, and we need to develop our prajna, or wisdom. So we need to practice these, because if we don't practice the 6 transcendences or other Dharma practices, we'll never get to a point where we're able to realize the ultimate. And as Gampopa says, there's a great danger that the view will become empty talk and your mind will remain ordinary. So you may be able to recite all of the texts of Nagarjuna by heart and expound on them at great length. You may be able to tell all of the instructions of Mahamudra and give great convincing explanations of them. But if in your heart you haven't practiced the virtue and you haven't really seen it, then at the moment of death, it will not have done you much good. It'll just be an idea. So as long as you think that everything is true, and as long as you think of what you hear from your guru, you think, this is true, this is real, then as long as you think that, then the 6 realms of samsara are also true, as Gampopa says. But when you no longer have attachment to truth, then you also see that the 6 realms of samsara are nothing other than dreams. When you see that the 6 realms of samsara are also nothing other than dreams, then you're seeing the ultimate. And that's not separate than a relative. The only difference is how we are looking at it. Are we looking at it as being real? Are we seeing it as being emptiness? How are we seeing it? So therefore, right now, while we're still in the relative, we have to practice the relative truth. And we have to be careful about this. We have to be honest with ourselves about it. We might think that we're getting to the state of relative truth. And when you do ultimately realize ultimate truth, then at that point, there's no karma or the ripening of karma. You are freed from it. That doesn't mean that there's no appearance of karma. It means that when things happen to you, they don't affect you. You see that they're emptiness. It's like nothing is happening, because it's just all like dreams and illusions passing by. Because you realize the nature. But if you have any clinging, then you don't have that. And so what is the measure of that? It says, Gampopa says, the point at which the ultimate truth has been realized is when you are freed of desirous thoughts, the pride of conceit, and the jargon of speech and words. So when you have desirous thoughts, and so this can be desirous on any level of desire. You might think that we're talking about like the gross level of desire in terms of like lust and greed and so forth. But even if you have smaller types of desire, I want to be important. I want to be big. I want people to respect me. If you have that sort of desire, even that is a sign that you have not realized the ultimate. So you have to look in yourself. Do you have that or not? Then the next thing he says is the pride of conceit. Do you have the thought, I have realized the ultimate truth. I understand the ultimate truth. And think of yourself, me, I've realized it. If you're thinking, I've realized it. I've realized the ultimate truth. I practice Mahamudra. I practice Dzogchen. I practice Kala Chakra. Aren't I great? You might not say, aren't I great aloud, but you're thinking it inside your mind. If that's what's happening, that's conceit, the pride of conceit. So conceit is like when you look at your own qualities or what you perceive as qualities and then kind of build yourself up based on those. That's what we mean by conceit here. And then the jargon of speech and words. The jargon of speech and words is when you're attached to the names, you're attached to the word Mahamudra, emptiness, interdependence, and you are tricked by that word and the idea of Mahamudra, interdependence, and emptiness. And because you are so clinging to that idea so much, you aren't actually seeing the real nature of Mahamudra or interdependence or emptiness. So you have to look, do you have those? Now, when you see that you don't have that pride of desirous thoughts, when you don't have the pride when you don't have desirous thoughts, when you are free to the pride of conceit, and when you're no longer clinging to just terminology, Dharma language, then at that point you've realized the ultimate. That's what it means. So you have to look and examine yourself. At that point you have realized the ultimate, says GAMPOPA. Then there is neither karma nor the ripening of karma. And when you've realized that reality, you are free to self-interest, and for the sake of others, you do whatever is helpful for sentient beings. So once you realize that ultimate empty state, you realize that nothing is really going to affect you for better or for worse. Everything is all essentially the same in nature. And yet you also realize that other sentient beings don't know that. They haven't realized this, and they experience things as real. They experience the suffering that they're feeling as real. They are distraught because they are losing people to illness. They are distraught because their business has been destroyed by a lockdown. They are distraught because they've lost their work. They are unable to pay their mortgage. They are experiencing tremendous suffering. And for them, it's real. It feels it. They feel it in their heart. They can't sleep at night. They have difficulty worrying about all these problems. And this is genuine suffering. This is genuine pain. It's empty. Yes, ultimately it is empty, but they are feeling it as if it's true. And because it's true for them, we have to do whatever we can to help relieve them of that suffering. Whether it's something, even doing something on the relative level, if there's something you can do to help the people around you who are suffering because of the epidemic and because of the lockdown and whatever else they might be suffering, then please do whatever you can. But ultimately, we have to realize the ultimate ourselves, and we have to bring all others to also realize the ultimate. And until that point, we have to continue doing virtuous activities. As GAMPOPA quotes Master Vairochana, says, and although you realize the meaning beyond birth and death, composite virtue must be continuous. So you have to think about it. Like, look at the examples of the great masters. For example, the Gyalwang Karmapa, when he makes offerings, he brings the best he can get. He gets the nicest offerings. He has these grand displays of offerings that he makes. He makes these huge displays. He does he does everything he can to make a beautiful offering. When he feels compassion for something, he'll do anything. He's so generous. Sometimes when people are it's sometimes hard for the people in the administration, in the Trupu Ladrang, when he's always giving things away, and they're trying to wonder, where are we going to get the money to pay for giving everything away? So we have to keep doing, just like the Karmapa, like all of the other great masters, like Rinpoche. We have to be as generous as we can, in every way that we can, no matter what we realize. But the main point is, as GAMPOPA says, have you realized the ultimate, or does the relative appear? You must look at yourself. So you have to look in yourself and be clear. Where am I? What level am I at? Am I still clinging to words? Do I still have desire? Am I still thinking about te tarik or durian or some other delicacy? Or is it all just a dream and illusion? So you have to look in yourself and see. Now, if you're still clinging to durian, as I might still cling to durian if it were in season and I were in a place where it grew, see, I'm even thinking about that just shows that I have clinging, right? So having that clinging to durian, of course durian's fine, but it's only durian, it's only fruit. We understand that on a certain level, but we still want it, right? So as long as we have that clinging, it's okay because we have to recognize we're ordinary sentient beings. You can't beat yourself up for being an ordinary sentient being. Instead, what you have to do is you have to work from where you are so that you are willing to give away things. Practice generosity, practice discipline, practice patience, practice diligence, and all of the other practices. To devote yourself to helping beings and helping your Dharma centers, helping the lamas, and practicing the Dharma yourself. And by doing that, eventually you get to the point where you won't be attached to anything, even durian. And at that point, we will be able to. We will be able to bring benefit to sentient beings. So, as GAMPOPA says, we must practice the two truths separately. So now I'd like to read the next talk. So GAMPOPA says, as for the Dharma, I would like to share with you all. At this point, we have no free time in life. We must abandon the discards in their entirety and apply the fine antidote that will prevent us from being reborn. A conscience and faith are important. It is possible that faith might dissipate at times. At such times, if you have a conscience, it will frequently aid you in not parting from the Dharma. The faith of a good conscience may also come, so a conscience is important. If you lack a conscience, when your faith grows stale, you might do too many non-dharmic acts. Then you would have no difficulty even doing acts that are wrong to do in this world, such as killing your own parents. Doing such a bad act a single time, you will lose all shame, and all your wishes will be blocked off and disappear. Thus, faith cannot stand on its own, so it is important to have a conscience. It is like how a weakling cannot be a king. When faith and conscience come together, whatever you do becomes dharma, like applying polish to gold. Though gold is always fine, applying polish makes it even finer. Similarly, in addition to practicing dharma with faith alone, your conscience will make you think, how could embarrassing myself in front of others be for my own and others' good? Afraid of shaming yourself before others, you will be careful in your conduct from that time onward, accomplishing all benefit for yourself and others. When faith and conscience come together in your practice, you must look to see how many qualities have arisen in your being. If you take all appearances as true, and all pain, pleasure, self, other, wealth, things, followers, and servants to be self-standing truths, you are no different from an ordinary worldly person. Thus, you must decrease your defiled ego clinging. If you do not aim that all you do be for the sake of sentient beings, it becomes the foundation vehicle, and you will achieve no result beyond that of the noble listeners. If you know that whatever appears is dreamlike and illusory, all you do will be like dreams and illusions. You will be acting for being's sake, and that is called having trained your mind in the Dharma Mahayana path. When you work for others' benefit in a dreamlike and illusory fashion without any wish for yourself, that is called being a bodhisattva. Doing whatever helps sentient beings, our lords, without any thought of treasuring yourself, and benefiting beings without getting weary is called being a bodhisattva. When the benefit for others occurs effortlessly, spontaneously, and continuously with no conception of other, that is called perfect Buddhahood. That being the case, if you act on appearances as autonomous, you will stray into being an ordinary individual. If you do not focus on benefiting others, you will stray into becoming a listener of Pratyeka Buddha. If that happens, verbal Dharma has not helped you at all. As it is said, bodhicitta is the wish for perfect Buddhahood to help others. If you do not dedicate others, all the virtues you do for others' sake, it is difficult for even the Dharma to become the path. You will not awaken to Buddhahood through Dharma that has not become the path. If you do not awaken to Buddhahood, there is no happiness in samsara. For that reason, for the sake of sentient beings, rouse bodhicitta and make dedications. It is important to know that instruction and to practice it. Since that is so, first, faith is important. Aid the Dharma with conscience. Then you need unfabricated loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. For that, you must treasure others more than yourself. That requires that emptiness and compassion be simultaneous. From the Mahamudra Tantra, those who engage emptiness without compassion have not found the supreme path. However, if you only meditate on compassion, the meaning of this quote is that emptiness without compassion cannot function as the path, and compassion without emptiness also cannot serve as the path. We need to take emptiness as having the essence of compassion. As it is said, emptiness with the essence of compassion. Practice emptiness and compassion simultaneously. There is no Dharma but that. So here, in this talk, Gampopa begins, as usual, by reminding us that we have little time to practice the Dharma, so we must be diligent. It says we must abandon the discards in their entirety, and the discards is a Dharma term. What it means is all of the afflictions, all of the dualistic thoughts, all of the obscurations that we need to eliminate from our beings, that we need to abandon and discard in order to achieve Buddhahood. And what we need for that are two things. So Gampopa lists two things, a conscience and faith. So conscience means here the thought that I could never do something like that. When you think of when there's a thought of a bad thing, you could think to yourself, I could never do that. I could never kill anyone. I could never steal. I'd be just so mortified with myself. So it's thinking, refraining from harmful actions out of your own sense of self-respect or dignity or whatever it is. So that's a conscience. And then the second one is faith. So faith, there are different levels of faith. And we've spoken about this in an earlier talk. But to remind you, there's like the faith that is just feeling sincerely faithful about something. It's like this really pure quality of mind, a purity of mind. That's really what we characterize faith as, is like this really pure, clear state of mind that just comes from really having that faith. That clarity is the faith, actually. And so there's the faith of just really thinking, oh, the Dharma is wonderful, without maybe knowing the reasons. Then there is the faith of really knowing, having studied and learned. So you study and you learn something. You either study talks like this, or you study talks like the Abhidharma that I've been giving in the past few weeks, or whatever it is that you study, you learn, you think, that's how it really is. And then that gives you faith. That's the faith that comes from knowing. So there's the faith, there's kind of blind faith and faith from knowledge. And then the third type of faith is the faith of longing. This is important. This is the faith of really wanting to be. Like you see someone like Trungpa Rinpoche and you think to yourself, I'd just love to be like Rinpoche. Or you see the Karmapa or the Dalai Lama and said, I'd love to be like the Karmapa and the Dalai Lama. I'll do anything to become like that. You see a Buddha, you think of the Buddha and say, I'd love to be like the Buddha. I really want to do that. You have that longing to do it. And when you have the longing to practice, then you will be able to actually engage in the practice. So this is important. So we have these two qualities, the conscience, the idea, I couldn't do anything like that, because of the idea that you just wouldn't do it. It's not something you'd ever even think of doing. That's the conscience. And then there is the sense of faith, that sort of clarity of mind that's kind of tinged with the desire to become like that. But what Gampopa says, it's possible that faith might dissipate at times, because we're ordinary sentient beings. It's normal. It's completely normal. You may think to yourself that you're the most faithful person on the planet, and that you have great faith, unshakable faith, and yet we're ordinary individuals. And no matter how much you think you're the most faithful person on the planet, even that person has moments where they have like a crisis of faith, we say in English often, right? A time when you wonder, how could this be? How could this be like that? And you kind of lose your faith. Or sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you just feel a little bit tired and your faith weakens because you're tired. So that's when faith dissipates a little bit. And so at that time, you need to have the conscience. Because if you don't have a conscience, then when you get tired, then you're going to be easier to go off and do things that you shouldn't do. Now, the example that GAMPOPA says is that you'll even do things that are wrong in the world, such as killing your parents. Now, I don't expect that there are so many of you out there who are in danger of killing your parents right now. But you do, and I mean, it's not like, maybe that's an extreme example, but there are things that we would do that we wouldn't ordinarily do. We'll act in unselfish ways. You do a small unselfish thing, or you do a small selfish thing, and then that gets you to doing a bigger selfish thing. And then you do even bigger selfish things, and before you know it, you're just being a jerk. You're just being selfish. You're being completely undharma. You'll even then engage in either lying or deceit or whatever, or even in stealing or whatever. You might engage in sexual misconduct or even killing animals, if not humans. That all starts from just getting a little bit weary of the Dharma. And so in order that that doesn't happen, then it's important for us to have that conscience so that we think when we start to get a little bit tired and our faith gets down and our guard starts to weaken, then we have to have the conscience of thinking, I couldn't do that. I'd never do that. Not only is it I just couldn't do it myself, but what if anyone else saw me? I might think I'm doing this little thing in private, but I'm not really actually. So it's like if anyone else saw me. So you've got these two aspects. You've got the aspect of this conscience, and then an aspect that you could call shame, or you could call a sense of embarrassment. The idea, I'd just be mortified if I were caught. Well, if you're going to think, I'd be mortified if I'm caught, and you're still willing to do it, what's that saying about you? So you have that sense. And when you have that, then that'll aid your faith. So this idea that even when you're feeling a little bit tired or getting a little bit careless, then you have that sense, and it helps you be more careful. And then you will be on the way for doing a better act. And so these two together, it's like when you have gold and you polish the gold. That's the analogy that that GAMPOPA gives. It's like your faith is like gold. And gold is always really nice. It's always really wonderful, but sometimes it gets just a little bit duller, you know. So then you want to burnish it. So you get a nice polish and you polish it up, and then it's really shiny. It's even better than it was before. Similarly, anytime you have faith, it's good, it's excellent. But if you have the conscience, then it becomes even better. And so this is really important for our Dharma practice. And so then the next part of this talk, GAMPOPA says, when faith and conscience come together in your practice, you must look to see how many qualities have arisen in your being. So you have to look in yourself. Once you have faith and conscience, then you evaluate where you are and see what you are doing. You need to look at your motivation. So are you still attached to pain and pleasure and wealth and things? If that is the case, then you're basically just an ordinary worldly person. So you have to do, and if that is where you are, then you have to try to decrease your ego clinging, starting by practicing generosity and then meditating on what is the self, contemplating the teachings on that there is no self and no me and no mine, as we spoke about earlier. And then the second thing is you need to look at your motivation. You need to see, am I doing this practice for myself, to free myself from samsara? Or am I doing it for the sake of all sentient beings? And if you're doing it for your own sake, then you're never going to get any result greater than that of the arhats, of the Theravada or the other foundation schools. You'll never be able to achieve Buddhahood. If you look at yourself and you can only honestly say that you know that all things are dreams and illusions, then you'll act for others' sake, because you realize that nothing really affects you, but other people still think it affects them, so you act for the benefit of others out of compassion. But when you do that, you have to look in yourself and to be clear. Are you merely mouthing it? Are you just saying the words? Or do you really believe it? Do you really feel it? Do you really know it? You have to look at yourself. You have to be honest. If you look at yourself honestly, most of us, I think, will see that when we say everything is like a dream and illusion, we can say that very easily, but for most of us, it's words still. Now, at a certain point, you have to fake it until you make it. You have to train in it. You have to think about it. You have to contemplate the meaning. You have a meaning of things being dreams and illusions, and you contemplate this. And you haven't really got there, but you're kind of pretending. And as you pretend, you get better and better at it until at some point you're actually going to realize it. And so when you do that and you work for the benefit of other sentient beings, that's what is like being a bodhisattva. So when you, this is what bodhisattva, this is what Gampopa says. He says, when you work for others' benefit in a dreamlike and illusory fashion, without any wish for yourself, that is called being a bodhisattva. So when you are doing good deeds, if you just realize that it's just things coming together, appearances happening, there's nothing real or lasting or true, there's no big benefit, there's no solid thing about any of it, and yet you continue to do the act anyway, realizing this, without any thought, this is going to help me, this is going to be better for me, then that's being a bodhisattva. You're not treasuring yourself. Because you realize it's like a dream, an illusion, you never get weary of doing it. That is what's being a bodhisattva. So then you can work for the benefit of others effortlessly and spontaneously and continuously with no conception of other. That is Buddhahood. So that's a little ways down the path. It takes a while. We have to go through being a bodhisattva first and then eventually get to the level of Buddhahood. But we start. We start by practicing this way. And so in this way, we have to practice, start by practicing. So we need to realize that appearances are not autonomous, real, solid things. We have to realize that they're just like mirages that come together from causes and conditions. It's like you're watching this teaching on a computer screen. You're looking at the screen and you aren't seeing me, you are seeing an image of me that is caused, coming together by data being transmitted over this incredibly complex network in a way that none of us really understand, and then making light on the screen that appears in the image that looks like Khenpo David. So it's easy, so it's like you're not actually seeing Khenpo David, you're looking at a piece of, what is it made out of? Glass. You're looking at a glass screen. It's not me. It's not Khenpo David, it's a glass screen. And it's similar with all the other appearances. When you look at the glass screen itself, there's nothing real. There's no single thing that is that glass screen. There's no single thing that is the computer. It's all many parts that are put together, causes and conditions that cause the computer to be there and to make the appearances of a video happening right now. So that means there's nothing solid about any of it. You can take your computer or your iPad or your phone and you can take it apart into any number of pieces, however many parts they have, and you'll never find anything real, there is no essence. I'm reading from an iPad and I could take this apart into all of the different component parts, and there'd be nothing there that is really an iPad, not even anything that is stamped with the logo iPad TM. That's not really an iPad either. There's nothing real there. So if you act on that, now we're ordinary individuals, so we automatically see things as being real. But if we kind of contemplate this and think about it, and then try not to act on our desires, then we can avoid being like an ordinary individual. And in this way, we will be able to move down the path. If we don't do this and we act on things as being real, then we're just going to be like regular people. And as Gampopa said, if that happens, verbal dharma has not helped you at all. So it's not the words alone don't help us. We have to actually transform the way we see things, which takes a long time and a lot of meditation. And so in order to do that, we have to begin with these qualities of faith. Faith is like the beginning. It says in the It says in the Sublime Continuum, the Mahayana Uttada Tantra Shastra by Maitreya, it says, the reality of the self-realized ones is realized only through faith. We can only realize the Dharmakaya through faith. We have to have faith. We have to start with that faith of the pure, sincere faith, the faith of conviction, and the faith of longing. And once we have that, then we can achieve Buddhahood. But in order for that faith to be beneficial, we also have to have a conscience. And then once you have that conscience, we also need to have unfabricated loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And in order to have that, we must treasure others more than ourselves. And in order to do that, we have to realize emptiness and compassion are inseparable. So in this way, we have to practice emptiness and compassion simultaneously, as GAMPOPA says in this talk. It is the emptiness with the essence of compassion. So that is this talk. And basically, the most important thing for us as beginners is to start with faith, develop a good conscience. And then when we have that faith and a good conscience, then we train ourselves in loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And if we do this, then all the Dharma that we practice will naturally follow along through that. So I would like to thank you all very much for listening to this talk. And at this point, we should dedicate all the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings. And in particular, let's dedicate it to the benefit of those sentient beings who are suffering because of the current pandemic, whether they're ill with it, whether they have lost their jobs or suffered a loss, whether a loss of a loved one or loss of a job because of it. And let's dedicate it that they may be freed of all that suffering, and so that all beings may swiftly be freed of all suffering and achieve the state of lasting happiness, Buddhahood. O sanam de tam je se pani tobne nye pedranam pamchene Kegana chimbala trumbai Sibe tsole drawan rolwan sho. Thank you.